what that means.
Yes, I can. So again, so happy new moon, everyone. And this new moon is in Gemini, and which is all dealing with the duality, really being able to tap into both your feminine and masculine energies. You're going to find that collectively and probably individually, a lot of us are going to start feeling like we are starting to come out. Like a lot of us have been, not only just quarantined physically, but also just like emotionally, just kind of holding stuff close. And now it's like this energy with the Gemini energy just opening up, almost like a lotus blossoming, if you will, and just really coming out of our shell and having a need to be a little bit more social, having a need a little bit more for community, also really tapping into your intuition. So you might have this like urge all of a sudden to do something very creative that you might have not had for a while. So it's gonna kind of spark that fire of that air. So also Gemini is an air element. So it's all about that communicating and connecting to your own intuition and really trusting what's coming up. And yeah, so that's kind of a little bit.
That's good. Yay! Yay, air signs. I'm an Aquarius.
Oh, you are? Oh, I didn't know. Wait, what's yours, Heather? What's your sign?
I am a Virgo sun, a Scorpio rising, and a Leo moon.
That's a whole lot. You a whole lot.
No one has ever said otherwise, Gracie.
Ever. What are you, Graciela?
I'm a fish. I'm a straight up Pisces. Like,
yes, you are. You are a Pisces.
my Pisces. I'm a Pisces sun. My moon is Sagittarius, so that's where like that fire comes, and a Gemini rising.
Oh, well, welcome to your moon.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yes. I grew up with a mother and a sister who are both Pisces, so I respond. I swim well with the fishes.
Yes, we got a lot of love to give.
That's right. That's
right.
I think.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Do we want to jump into our intro? I see we have people in our waiting room, and we can...
I think we should. Oh, we do. Hello, and welcome everybody. My name is Joey Stocks, and I'm here at the pool with my co-hosts Graciela Asher, who is a Reiki master and ceremonialist, among other things, and Heather Carlucci, who's a psychic medium and medical intuitive, among other things. And I'm an editor and fitful writer, designer, storyteller. That's plenty. Hi.
Hi. Happy Memorial Day weekend.
Happy Memorial Day weekend. And as Graciela was just telling us, happy new moon.
Happy new moon.
Yes.
Hello to our Geminis, and yeah, and all that entails. So let's just jump right in. So in this fantasy pool party, no one gets sunburned or sucks chlorine up their nose. The kids are just fine. So I want to spend this perfect poolside hour getting to know our special guest a bit better. Should we go ahead and just bring her on?
Sure, let's do that.
I think we should. So I'm gonna hope that I'm saying your name correctly as you're coming on screen. Rosangel Perez. I hope I just said that right. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Is the hi? Look at you with your fancy microphone, your beautiful sunglasses. I'm so jealous.
I'm ready for the playa. You've got the fuego coming in.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for inviting me to the psychic pool party. I came prepared, guys. I've got a mystery drink.
Ooh. And does that mean that we should guess?
I don't know. Ooh.
Yeah.
Maybe. What do you think it could be?
I'm just gonna jump right in with Cafecito.
No.
Cacao?
No.
It's in the naughty vein.
Oh.
Huh? Mimosa.
You're very close. I ran out of orange juice, so it's naked.
Booze.
I'm just taking it straight, baby.
Nice.
Woo! Okay. You still have
Advanced
bars there.
I was told to come prepared to the pool party.
You brought the pool party.
You did. You brought the party. It's
Well,
so
you
good
guys
to
have
see
the
you.
vibe. I love Graciela, my sister's a fish. She's a fellow Pisces, so I call her my fish. And she corrected me. She said, I'm a merfish. Let's get that right. So I've learned as living with the Pisces in my life, my entire lives, being a fire sign, that fishes do have their way of stinging. Right?
Right.
To the way in a way that this little fuego is like, I don't know now what to say. My words left.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so true.
Little fuego. I mean, what's a little fuego? I've never met a little one.
It's the small version of the four-door sedan.
I
Gotcha.
just figured. So how are you guys doing today? Heather, so lovely to see you again. Joey, so
So
great
good.
to meet you. I love
It's
those
great to meet
glasses
you.
and the vibe. I
Thanks.
want to be there hanging out in the beach where you are at with a little towel
Just a little one.
I want the same.
with a big drink.
The big
That's right. With a big drink. That's right. So I want to ask, first of all, I'm so curious about so much of your story and how you got to where you are, and where you are and what you're doing right now. There's so much to get to. And I had prepared, because you are the co-owner of Botanikal. It reminded me of a story that I was going to tell, but I realized the story I typically tell is part of a much, much, much bigger, more sprawling story. And I'm not sure that I'm going to feel adept enough to extract it from its original context. But I will give you the brief overview of my first time to a Botanica.
Mm-hmm.
Many years ago, when I first moved to the city, my ex and I were living in an illegal sublet in Alphabet City
Airbnb.
way pre. Oh, I was going to say, yes, but before there were chain food stores and
Oh,
restaurants, right?
that's
That
another
Alphabet
point.
City, yeah. And
That
anyway, the person from whom we were subletting was a friend of a friend's mother, who was subletting this apartment we were told she owned, and she was going back to Puerto Rico for a time. And in that interim, subletting her apartment for a minimum of 2 years. And we were like, awesome, it's a 2-bedroom with a view. Amazing, yeah? So we
yeah.
moved in, and she left her daughter in charge of the sublet. And her daughter's name is Nilsa. Nilsa was super friendly and very interesting, and she was fascinated with us because we had moved from the South. I'm from Arkansas. And
Very
so
cool.
my boyfriend got a job, an acting job, out of the state just shortly after we moved in. And so he needed to go to the airport, and she offered to drive him. So we drop him off at LaGuardia, and as we're pulling away, she asks me, she says, do you mind if we run a couple of errands on the way home? I said, no, of course not. And so as she's driving towards Spanish Harlem, she starts to tell me all about her religion, assuming that this white boy from Arkansas would know nothing about Santeria. She was right. So about the time that she got to the part of her, by the way, she told this story like she had told it 1,000 times. I mean, it was so well crafted and beautiful the way that she told it. I mean, it was so rich coming out of her. I sat quietly and just listened. So about the time she got to the part discussing ritual, she pulled over, parked next to a fire hydrant, and said, wait here, I'll be right back. And she dashes off across the street and returns moments later with a white dove that was inside of a makeshift crate that had been cobbled together from scrap cardboard, twine, and tape. And I was just kind of wide-eyed, not really understanding what the hell was going on, and not sure that I was curious enough to ask at that point. And she looked at me and grinned, and she said, she started to tell me what the white dove was all about. And then she just, I guess, sensed the fact that I was like totally clueless. And so she said, we have one more stop. It's just down the street. She said, have you ever been to a Botanica? Me, wanting to pretend like I was way more worldly than I was, went, oh, sure. Yeah, I grew up on a farm. And she kind of cocked her head. And I said, yeah, I mean, you know, we had to go to a place that we didn't call it a Botanica, but we had to go to this place that we called a nursery, where we would buy our tomato plants every summer for the garden. And she just starts shaking her head and she went, oh, no, 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 no. And she pulls over and parks next to a fire hydrant. And she says, come inside. So we go inside, and this has been so long ago, my memory of this is somewhat sketchy and not full of all the details, but it was a small shop. It was very dark in there. I remember it had a bare concrete floor, and there was like, the whole perimeter was surrounded by a giant countertop. The ceiling had little bundles of severed deer legs that were held together with twine and hung from the ceiling. That was interesting to me. And then behind the counter was this short woman who was sort of square shaped and looked like the Hawaiian Punch Man. Right? You know that cartoon character from the Hawaiian Punch Can, you know, with the crazy kind of shock of hair and sort of brutish. And she was wearing a man's shirt, and she walked up to the counter, and Nilsa walked up to the counter, and spoke to each other in rapid fire Spanish that I was just amazed, because when she spoke English, it was very laid back. Suddenly she was energized. And so I just was standing back taking it all in, and this Hawaiian Punch woman produces 2 repurposed plastic Coca-Cola bottles full of a dark liquid and mysterious chunks floating around in it. I still to this day do not know what was in there, and I don't really want to know. She puts them up on the counter. Nilsa pays her cash. She turns around and starts to leave, and this woman points at me, the Hawaiian Punch woman, jabs her finger at me and kind of nods. And Nilsa turns around and looks at her, and then Nilsa says something to her in Spanish, and the woman points at me again. And Nilsa turns and she says, she wants to talk to you. And I said, oh, I don't speak Spanish. And she said, I just do it. And I said, okay. So I walk up to the counter, and she had on some half glasses. She pulls her half glasses down. She leans in, and her eyes were cloudy with cataracts.
Wow.
She leaned way in, and she just froze and said nothing for about 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden she kicks her head back, laughs, and out comes like a Harvey Firestein frytone. She barks at me and then laughs again. And she's nodding like this. And I turned and I looked at Nilsa, and Nilsa's smiling, and she walks up cautiously to the countertop, and she says something polite to her in Spanish, and then she tells me I just asked her if she needs anything else. And the woman just shaking her head and like motioning like Tracy Ullman at the end of her show, go home, right? And we turn and we leave, and Nilsa grabs my arm and she leans into me and she says, do you know what she just said? And I said, no, I have no idea. And I said, was I in trouble? And she said, no. She said, she looked at you, and she looked right into your soul, and she saw that you are pure. And she said to me, he's pure, pure white light. He's welcome here anytime.
I love that.
Isn't that great? I was
that.
never back. But that's I had a similar experience in my first Judaica, but that's a different story.
We'll say that when we have the rabbi on.
I know.
That's
Wait,
right.
you know what I appreciate about that story, Joey? A couple of things is for whoever's tuning in, Botanicas are places where people go seeking spiritual insights and wisdom. And depending on the cultural practice or tradition that that person has studied or is under a lineage, that will be how their botanica will feel. So people, it's not an all one size fits all kind of thing, right?
Sure.
um that experience where, like, even when you were telling me before the message, I was like, this woman saw you and she went into a channeled state. Because when you go into those places like that, it's one of those things where uh most of the time botanicas seem and have this very humble element to it, right?
Very.
And it is such a testimony of, don't dismiss what may look like nothing, like what may look like this little box. I could be like, I'm gonna give you this little box, and you're like, this is not, what is this? This is stupid. But inside could be the most amazing smelling resins, filled and packed with my intention and love. And because I gave that to you with that intention, maybe because something when I saw you inspired me to do this, then you're not only receiving the precious gift of nature in and of itself, but the energy behind it and intention that it was just given to you. So our shop, Botanica, is actually named after that tradition, that place. Is like, you come over here to experience a little bit of spiritual wisdom and insight if you are looking for it. If you just want some tools, some crystals, some incense, because it's your journey, and we're not there to interfere, but if we're there to to answer your questions if we're able to. And so it's one of those places where in moments like these, especially the days that we are living in right now, um I mean, look at what happened. I mean, obviously spirituality and religion, they're they're like kind of like walk like this and sometimes they do this, but we're
Yeah.
even seeing that when it comes to people who walk in faith, who have their religion, this is prime time test time, you know. Everybody who has some sort of faith, some sort of spiritual practice, they are getting tested. And at the same time, it's such beautiful downloads are coming in for those who are ready and willing to receive it. At the same time, so many of our brothers and sisters are like having that moment where what's beautiful then that happens to a lot of people, the way they awaken is that something jars them into an awakening. Unfortunately, it's usually something that shocks you. So sometimes when you walk into places like that and you see something that may look like scary, like, do I have it over here? Hold on. I have my altar here. No, she's missing. Oh, my skull is over there. But some people see a crystal skull and they get so afraid because they start thinking of mortality, right? And then when you're able to have an open conversation with people, you're like, okay, are you Catholic? Let's just say, right?
Yeah.
um and they're like, yeah, okay, so have you not seen that so many saints throughout the time have been painted gazing at a skull?
Mhm.
Like, what is that about? Like, have you not been to these temples and churches of all denominations that have skulls? Like, so
Mhm.
why are we afraid of it? So for me, I got I was very scared of people who were practicing or were living like lives of alternate spiritual, like santeria, espiritismo. Oh my gosh, she's a psychic. Because when you grow up hardcore religious, and depending on who's reading you the text, and they're saying all those people are heretics. But then you read another text and it says God gives each and every one of us this gift, this don, which is just for you, right? The pearl. So then when I was this little girl, I was this fiery questioning little girl, because I'm like, but wait a minute, I'm confused. So if some people are blessed with the gift of tongues, I know psychics are blessed with gift of tongues. I know there are santeros and spirititas that are blessed with gift of tongues. How come we're calling them heretics and lunatics, and wanting to put the scarlet letter on them? But it's okay if Felicita from the church does it, but she's one of the most putrid human beings I know because she's always gossiping. So it's sort of like this whole space that we're in right now is like Tremendo chip out the door. All the veils are coming down.
Mhm. Oh,
Nice.
Ow, afuera.
Nice.
I like-
Yes. I want to know, I'm sure you've told this story 1,000 times, and so, but I've not heard it. I've just read a little bit about it. Would you tell us, so let's start with, you're working as a producer at MTV, yes?
Yes.
And what happened that led you to where you are right now?
I guess the short story is, and I tell people, if you are familiar with the Eat, Pray, Love story, I said that I had the Puerto Rican version of that. Like I lived it. Like if you see the story, it happened backwards. Like she went to Italy. I didn't travel there, but the way it happened for me was, you get to a certain point when you're doing something for so long, and I already at MTV, I was already like my ninth, 10th year, and I already knew that mama needs to do something different for a couple of things, right? When you're starting and you're working in production, one of the first things I realized when I joined the team, I was like, my heavens, there's a lot of young people here. Where are the people that are a little bit older? And then when you work a couple of years, you realize that we fatigue out of the system.
Yeah.
Right. And then it sucks because you grow up studying, you work so hard to do something you love so much, and then you realize that that recipe doesn't work anymore, because even though you're making great money, you're traveling, you're meeting these celebrities, right? Perks. uh what kind of life do you have when you go home if you can't really enjoy it with your family, if you're working so long, if you're so exhausted that you can't even have an active relationship because you're so
Right.
checked out and you're just always catching up? And when it came to that, for me, at the same time, my dad was getting sick, and I knew I needed to make certain decisions, because when you are like raised, or my father was a typical man, who, like a Latino man that loves his food, and you want me to go on a diet and eat rice cakes and things with no salt? Are you ridiculously kidding? So as he was failing, as his health started to fail, I started to seek other alternatives. I was like, okay, this may not be forever. I'm going to study health coaching to just see where that goes. But in the meantime, I started just sort of taking classes, one little class toward herbalism. All of a sudden you're making your little potions. All of a sudden you're kind of getting intuitions, and something's telling you, put 3 drops over here. And then you're serving this tea, and that person's headache is gone. And you're like, was that love? Was that what I put in? Was it a combination? So you start having these experiences, and it's like what I tell people, um, seek and you shall find. So one thing that I have to confess is that even though when I was on MTV and I was a line producer, and at the height of my career, I was managing multi-million-dollar productions. I had a team of 40. We were producing 60 episodes in 8 months. Can you imagine? And I had a team in California, several places in the city, teams traveling all of the time, and all decisions filtered through me.
Mhm.
At that moment, my father passed away.
wow.
When I had, like, at the top of, like, you work 11 years to get this money, to get the title, and then my biggest high was met with my biggest heartbreak.
Mhm.
I didn't know how to reconcile that in my body. So as I was going home and healing, and I was so grateful, something that never happens in the industry as a freelancer, I was actually, my team made space for me to have a full month off. And I took that time completely by myself. When you're in that state of so much grief, there's very little that catches your attention for fun. You just have to write it out. You just have to cry it out. And I had all at the same time been creating and cultivating a healthier existence. You start by taking little steps, doing a little yoga. Now you're drinking more water, and next thing you know, all these little steps are adding up to something, and all of a sudden you're perceiving more, and all of a sudden, well, one of my biggest transition points, and this is kind of what brings everything together, is that when you grow up in an environment where even if it comes from the good of the people, they're telling you that multidimensionality does not exist, that perceiving beyond the senses does not exist. That fucked me up. Sorry, beep. And
We're
so
not censored here.
Family show.
oh, awesome. So even though I was this big mamacita, working on cribs, traveling around the country, guess what was happening at nighttime? I couldn't sleep for crap.
Right.
It didn't matter who I might entice to be like, hey, can you sleep next to me? Because I'm afraid. And people make fun of me. It's like, how is it that you're this grown ass woman and you're asking one of your friends to come and sleep over because you don't want to sleep at night? And then I started to realize that it didn't matter if there was a person next to me. The moment I closed my eyes, I still felt things. I still saw these little lights. I'd be writing in my journal and I would hear things and I'm like, oh my God. And I thought I was gonna have a freaking nervous breakdown. And then I went to see someone I want, not a therapist, but somebody who was a social worker, but had all these insights. She also has her magic, and it was through her that two things came through, that I was afraid of, you know, the stories that I would hear about people who were practicing Santeria and Spiritismo, because they were weaved to me as if they were evil people. What
Mhm.
I didn't understand and what I understood now is that it doesn't matter what the religion is, it's the purity of the heart. Because as I said earlier, that you could have Doña Maria who's praying the rosary a million times a day, but the minute she leaves the church, she's gossiping, she's talking trash about other people. And you start to realize that the word materializes, and and to be more careful with it. So when I had that crash point, everything came together, the fatigue with this extra sensitivity. I was so sensitive that someone can say a word and the vibration of that word would shove me and take me I would lose my balance. Like, I had to leave MTV. My boss, that I only had one boss who was kind of like catching on that something was up, because I couldn't even be in front of her. I would start like swaying. I would go like I couldn't control it. So I had to go and integrate all that, purge and heal, right? What I didn't realize, and this is where the ego steps in, is that you think, I was like, oh, okay, so I'm just gonna design my spiritual awakening. I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna give this up. I'm gonna go to Brooklyn. I'm gonna be in this little apartment. And the universe was like, Mamita, you haven't even started. We're gonna take a little bit more away from you. And then I ended up in a space where, oh my heavens, I don't have an employment. I can't pay for my apartment. I have to put my stuff in storage. Thank God for friends. Thank God for friends. And then you ride that out. And that was a couple of years. And when you go from living and feeling like you're in the top of the world, and all of a sudden people don't understand what's happening to you, and they think she went crazy. She left MTV. So all of a sudden, the people that hated me or were hating on me in my community because I was working at MTV, they were hating on me because they say she's stupid, she left.
You and I have a very similar story in that regard.
Yeah, sorry, you see the sirens. They go nuts. It's the fire. I started activating fire and they wanted to co-create it with me.
That's fascinating. So did you start the Botanica first? Was that your first?
Look, when I
Like,
when I jumped in, my first thing, honestly, when I came home, when I left MTV, my intention was I just want to go home, heal. And then I'm like, okay, I've got a little time, I got a little cushion, let me go volunteer. And then that starts opening your eyes, because I was coming from a place where you're in a bubble, right? Like right now, a lot of my industry friends, whether they're like the A-list celebrities or they're like the production people, that it's like they're starting to see there's another world, and you were in a bubble. Like I was in a bubble. I'm thinking, oh, I'm just gonna go into that organization, they're just gonna love me and I'm gonna get all this access. And then you start to realize that the real world and other organizations don't work the way MTV worked, or it's not gonna give you this, or they're gonna look at you like, I don't know who you are, and you got to start from the bottom.
That's
And
right.
so then a lot of people don't realize that when you really want something, you have to do the work and you start from the bottom. There's like, my sister and I were talking about it, like in the last couple of years, we've seen such a wave of the younger generations awaken, which I love and it's beautiful. But it's been at casting out some of the elders and their wisdom, which is not okay. So I'm like, I'm sorry. A lot of times people be coming into my little shop and they be thinking, oh, these girls are young. They must know nothing. And I'm like, we are learning every day. You're absolutely right. We are students. And if you think that you know everything, that just tells you that you have so much more to go.
You're never not a student. You are never not a student.
That's right.
And I love how you are saying about, what happened to you as far as relating it to what's happening to a lot of people right now, because I feel like a lot of people right now are being forced into their almost awakening in a way, because that veil is just like poof, and it's leaving so many people being like, just like you had that experience of like, wait, like there's a whole nother world. Like there's a whole nother world out there. And I thought I had my little cushiony job. I thought I had my little car. Well, where are you driving your car to now?
Nowhere.
Where are you wearing your cute little outfits to now? So it's really even though I still wear my cute little outfit.
Get it, girl.
But you know what I mean? I think that it's really a like very interesting. And do you have any like wisdom or recommendations for people that kind of had a similar situation that they're going through right now, going through a lot of loss, going through a lot of trauma? Maybe somebody in their family also had something happen to them, or they lost their job, and there might be feeling or enticed to explore other avenues. Is there any advice that you can give them or guidance?
Graciela, you asked me such a great question, because one of the things I've realized in, I guess, specifically the last 10 years, but in a way, this is like a journey of a lifetime, is that the universe has been cultivating me to hold space to have those conversations around grief. Not something I was like, hello, let me volunteer to have this fun conversation, right? But as I went through, like, my father passed away 2009. There's not a day that I don't think about that man. He is and will always be the greatest love of my life. When he passed away, that was the greatest void, right? And so, unfortunately, in this today moment, so many of our brothers and sisters have lost their greatest loved ones, their greatest love stories, or one of their greatest love stories. That is a pain that is unimaginable. It is not something that goes away. Grief is a roller coaster. Some people say it's steps, but it's not steps. It's one day you're happy, 5 minutes later you might be upset. A second later you might be in pure grief. My recommendation is allow yourself to feel the purity of each emotion, because it's a gift. And I was looking, and I call, we go back to school.
Yeah.
I call this my everything gratitude book. I put everything in here: doodles, to-dos, how I'm feeling. And every single time you're experiencing a purity of that emotion, honor it. If you feel like you want to cry, cry. It's helpful if you're able to do it in a space where it's uninterrupted. So whatever comes up is going to come up. And one of the greatest, most beautiful moments for me was when I was in that pure grief that I just couldn't cry anymore. Because at a certain point, guys, you can't cry anymore. It's like your body's like, I'm tired. Give me something else. And it was in that stillness that my father's image sort of came in through my third eye. And he was holding a glass of red wine, and he was in his tux, and he was smiling at me. And I just knew energetically, like, so many messages came through at that moment. One of them was, I want you to enjoy your life. Another one was, you had your dad. There's some people that didn't get their father for one day. You had him for 30 something plus years, and you guys had one of the greatest relationships a father and a daughter can have. Like, that is something that will live on forever. So then I started a gratitude practice, and that's something I recommend to everyone. I do have an ongoing appreciation yoga. We upgraded it the
Here's
times that
mine.
wanted us to. Oh, I love it. I like yours even more. Yours, I like yours.
Thanks.
I chose green just for prosperity.
I respond deeply to orange. It's a whole
Yes,
thing.
you do.
Ooh,
Yes, you do.
That's
You know,
sacred.
Orange is great.
That's sacred chakra.
I'm sorry?
I wanted to sort of, oh, sorry.
No.
Okay. I want to sort of, right on the coattails of what you said, because what a lot of people also don't realize about being here at this time, as difficult and as strange, and it, as you know, I get a little tired, I'm sure everybody here does, that people who are sort of in that health and wellness business talking about like great changes and do your best work, but there are people suffering enormous pain and enormous loss. And those of us who are even just a little bit less affected than they are still privileged. But one of the things that we really have to remember is the fact that we have a soul's contract to be here. We made the decision before walking on the earth again to be here. We knew what we were in for somewhere, and in some space that gives enormous amount of comfort, because some part of you made a decision to be here. It must mean that you were meant to be able to handle it. I think people really forget that about the things that we confront. It's like, okay, let's go through this. Let's do it as gracefully as we can, and as messy, because we are messy. We're awfully messy. Messy is fine, but let's walk through this. So I think that's one of the big things that we have to, you're talking about grief and grieving, is such a big part of the human experience. We grieve for the littlest things. We grieve when our car gets stolen. We grieve for moving and marriage and change and death and divorce. And we, you know, some of us grieve when we lose one earring, because we're like, I love those earrings.
Right.
It's part of us. So I want to sort of just add that to it, and that, yes, of course. And because you're in, also one of the things that I appreciate very much about how you and your sister have gone about your business is that it is brick and mortar. And there is something, I tell people this a lot because I owned restaurants for many years, and before that I worked in them. There's something specific about a brick and mortar business that, unless you actually do it and have one, you don't quite understand both the weight of carrying that on your shoulders and as well how needed you are, because people need to walk into another space. And you open yourself up to the very best and the very worst. So so can we talk a little bit about that? Because you're very involved in community as well. And you are also very involved in activism, which was one of the first things I loved about you.
This is true.
Because in the space in which we met, not a lot of people were talking activism except for the two of us.
And what's funny was that there were all these women in the room, and all delicious
70.
women, I must say. They were all vibrant because I was just juiced up by just being in that environment. But when Mamacita Heather started speaking, I got lit up in a way. I was like, whoa! Who's this woman? I have to meet her.
I was like, who's that? That used to be my friend.
Here we are.
Here we are at the pool.
At the pool, at the fiesta.
At the swim up bar. See, I got a swim up bar today.
I'm going there afterwards.
I mean, this looks like DR to me completely.
I love that vision because I'm totally ready to go to a resort and be paid.
Anywhere. Actually, anywhere.
You know, you mentioned a couple of things. I think that first, a lot of people that I listen to these days who are, you know, business entrepreneurs or marketers, they're like, don't do brick and mortar. That's hard. You've got to go online. That's where the money is. And I'm not saying that's not incorrect, because my sister and I, we're still trying to do the online thing, but our souls, our hearts, they just want to be with people. And there's something so magical when you have that person.
Oh my God, yes.
Walking in. And this also answers your question, Graciela. My sister and I, we've realized, you know, a couple of things, because some people are like, how do you know you're a healer? And I'm like, listen, I'm a little free spirit. Mama didn't decide that I wanted to be in a shop for all of these years. Like something bigger ordained themselves, so this could happen for us, because there's a need. You know, when you set an intention, you're like, I want to be helpful to community. One must be patient to listen and witness the signs that are talking around you in the universe. Then some people, because it's so fun when you're like, oh my God, I'm getting an intuition.
Yeah.
Right? It's so fun. It's so fun, right?
So fun.
It's so fun, but then you start to realize there's such a deep responsibility to that fun. There's such a deep responsibility for what you're intuiting, and there's an even bigger responsibility to what opens up in comes out of your mouth as wisdom to somebody else. So when you're like, yo, I had this crazy dream about you, you better be careful. Like, wait, where are you saying that to that person? Are they on their way to work across the street? Do you know if they can handle what can come out of your mouth?
That's
There's
right.
such responsibility that comes in. Another thing that people don't realize is that you have to have some strength. Some, like, my sister and I were so beautiful because we're the fire and that water. So we balance each other very, very well.
Mhm.
But you better believe it. There are times with the teeth and the wolf have to come out because people, places like that attract the most beautiful souls. And sometimes, thank God, just very few times, some very putrid people that just want to visit your space because they hate on the fact that you're doing well or that you're perceived to be doing well. Because that's another thing. Like, I've had
Yep.
people come in there like, you got this business and everything, how come you're not supporting other people? I'm like, you obviously don't know what it's like to be a business entrepreneur and to have a bit
That's
brick and
right.
mortar, because there's loans, there's insurances, there's rent, there's
Yes.
storage, there's buying merchandise, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then there are people who will come in there like I've had a couple of, whether they are aware of it or not, but some people have very, very strong vibrations. So there's been times where I've fielded energetic attacks from people who just want, whether they realize that that putrid is coming out of them or it's done intentionally. So a lot of times, one of the things I made my sister say is that we end up having conversations a lot with people who are brand new in their spiritual awakening. So we get a lot of the first timers, which we think is one of the most precious of experiences. And a lot of times we tell them, like, listen, you have to be careful because you're brand new to this and you're telling me you want to astral project, but are you going to do that with alcohol? And
Yeah.
you're going to be this beautiful light and you have no idea what might be trying to get
Vodka.
at you.
Vodka specifically is how I do it.
Well, once you know, and you know, but when you're starting fresh and you're this brand new light and all of it, so what I witness is a lot of people start dabbling, they start going into these retreats, they start doing all these medicines, and they don't know anybody, they don't trust
Right.
anybody, and all of a sudden they're not settled. All of a sudden that glow and that youthful, it leaves them. They look like they haven't bathed for days. They're like this, they're panicked, and I'm like, this is not an easy journey, because every step
That's
you're
right.
opening up lots of doors that you may or may not know, and beings that are like, oh, I see her, she's juicy.
You know, I teach a class now that is psychic level intuition for healthcare and wellness professionals. So people that have already, anything from a yoga instructor to therapists, psychotherapists, people who already do so much of the work that has to do with energy between people. And the two biggest things that both resonate with the students a lot that I always put on first is the two things you have to concentrate the most on, and this gets broken down a lot, is confidence and ethics. You must know your ethics, their ethics, which you can only find out in the middle of it, and your boundaries and their boundaries. That's the most important thing. Ethics and confidence, not cockiness, not ego, just confidence in the fact that what you bring in is pure and it goes out. And the only way you have that is if you know your own ethics.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of reminds me of like the Botanica example. Some people focus so much on looking the part, and some people are just being the part.
That's
And
right.
so some of the most gifted individuals, I'm not knocking on looking the part, but I'm saying look the part when you are the part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, obviously everybody here has a sense of things, and what it is you're seeing. You know when you're seeing light, when you're seeing authenticity. And at the same time, we also know when we're looking at somebody that has all those things and maybe they're not in the space to do it right then and there, or they're not ready yet. And I think that really goes to the fact that we are so, as you were saying, multidimensional. There's not one way of doing any of this. The only thing you need to pay attention to is authenticity.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
And even,
absolutely true.
one of the things that I've come full circle about was like when I was fresh into the awakening process, I was like, Kaka, I'm done with religion. And then as you go through your journey, your ups and downs, and I'm like, wait a minute. Some of the people of the greatest faiths are those that I'm knocking that are still in their religion.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, so,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start to realize, wait, harm none. Like this is making him, her happy. They're not harming anyone. They're completely in their faith. They're happy. They're grounded. Why am I triggered? Why
That's
am I
right.
triggered?
That's real.
Like,
Right.
as long as I'm living my life, authentically, as you
Mhm.
mentioned, right? And I have to say too, when I was seeing the the postings for the psychic pool party, and I
Mhm.
saw your cute faces, I was like, "Ooh, this is gonna be so much fun." I vibed it out. I went to your pages. I was like, "Ooh, yes, I cannot wait."
Yay.
I'm having so much fun, guys. Thank you.
'Cause we don't know what we're doing, so it's perfect.
we
We're in the psychic pool party.
that's
That's
exactly
all we need
right.
to know. That's all we need
That's
to know.
right. I just wanted to say that going back to the whole idea of brick and mortar and responsibility, I loved everything that everybody has said in regards to that. As somebody who comes from theater, the place where I connect to the psychic pool party is and to the idea of religion, being aware of a higher power, is from performing. And right now, the brick and mortar of the spaces in which we perform are closed off to us. And there's so many people who are trying, like we are right now, trying to establish some kind of human connection that via Zoom, via whatever platform electronically there is. And there's some degree of satisfaction there. I think there is some degree, depending on how strong-willed you are and how receptive you are, of transferring and receiving energy that way. But like you said, there's just nothing like having that space that's yours, or that you inhabit, and that you welcome other people into for that exchange of energy. And yeah, I'm missing that so desperately right now, because that's my jam. That's when I know that there's everything in the world is that's material is just one level.
Yeah.
It's just one layer.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm missing that, and I'm grateful at least for this strange electronic substitute, because it's giving me a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just
Feeling it's a frequency, right? And we're
it
tuning into
is
each other's
Mhm.
frequency, and this is why this is such a juicy chat.
right. Yeah. Well, and I
All
also
about
wanted to
you.
say, yeah, I also wanted to say that I really appreciated everything that you were saying about the responsibility of stepping into. Sorry, I'm losing my earphones. Of stepping into your intuition, uh, you know, realizing that that does come with responsibility. Although I wouldn't at any point in my training have said that as a performer, um, I feel intuitive. It's all about intuition, truthfully. Um, I wouldn't have used that word back then. I would freely use that word now. But the thing that sort of pulled me away from performing, and I've had a hiatus from it for quite a while now, both as an actor and as a dancer, is that I think there are two reasons to go into it. One is ego, and one is service.
Mm.
And there was never any question for me that it was always about service. And as I started to not just to study, but really step into the professional realm and to be around other people, I found that I could quickly clock those people who were there for their own ego, and those people who were there for service. And it is a very different performer, and most of them are ego driven. And for me, this time that we're in right now is all about the sorting out of the ego and the service. I feel like for me, that's what this time is all about. I see it more clearly now than maybe I've ever seen it before, and I'm able to articulate it in a different way. So anyway, that's, for me, that's why we're having the Psychic Pool Party. It's to learn about fantastic people like you and to spend time with Graciela and Heather.
I
Can
love
you
it.
tell us a little bit about Cafecito Break?
Yes, please.
Sure. Well, Cafecito, this is such a perfect segue too, because Cafecito Break represents community, right? It's a community podcast. It's 100% independent. And it was me saying yes to my dreams. I was like, wait a minute, if I could work 110% for someone else and be so loyal and maybe not even love any of the programming I was a part of, how is it going to feel if I do it for myself? So at first, so Cafecito Break is, we describe it as, it's the voice of the awakening woman, right? Because it's a platform that's produced by women, but you know, we have all kinds of guests.
Mhm.
But that moment of the woman who is questioning, asking bigger questions, and for us, the awakening, you know, you start when you're first diving into the awakening, it might be you're figuring this out, and then as the pieces start coming in, you're like, wait a minute, like what happened to me in Cafecito Break, at a certain point when I was talking about all the fluffy wuffy stuff, you know, you're still sort of like coming out of your bubble and you're realizing, wait, most of the people I know don't even have time to hear this conversation because they are living such a stress life. They're working so many jobs. The kids have like so much homework. Like I don't understand the educational system these days. They use like, so it, life put me like in a space where I'm observing this world, and I started to realize, oh, you know that mainstream media and the news is only telling a slice, and
Mhm.
it's not telling the slice that really benefits the people that you grew up in your community, that urban environment. And we're seeing it right now. We're seeing it right now. Like the people are crazy, going mad because they're like, I don't understand what they're saying to me on the television. Every other person is saying something different. These three leaders in New York City alone can't agree, so how am I supposed to figure out what I'm going to do? And then I realized that, okay, that's my responsibility. I went to do this. How do I bring this home? I integrate it. I integrate this love of spirituality, this love of community, this love of family with this love for wellness. And we need us needing to have these conversations that may not be so pretty. But when we are having loved ones that are in our community that are being abused or taken away, or and it's happening right under our nose, or we keep losing loved ones to epidemics or drugs or whatever, we're just like, it's not happening, no, I'm just living my life. Then that's where like how I, like how you drew the parallel, Joey, between like the ego in when you could be in the entertainment and then the service. I
Mhm.
see that too when it comes to people who are in our communities who are like, I'm a metaphysical, but but then something's happening across the street. Don't think positive. Think positive. Don't think negative thoughts. Those people attracted that to their karma. They have to deal with it.
Uh,
Don't let it alone. And I'm like, are you here with the rest of us? Do you really believe that crap? So this is when the fuego comes out of me.
I'm all in.
I
Ah,
feel you 1,000%. And it's something actually I was just talking to friends of mine yet last night during a private moon ceremony that we were having. And I was just like, yo, so many of the spiritual people are really not in it for the right reasons. You know, they're not here, like Joey said, to serve. You know, a lot of them have other agendas or their egos that they just want to, you know, flock their feathers. And it's like, no, like you said, it's a responsibility, and we have to hold space and not just only be there for the shiny and the beautiful times that, yes, because the magic can be amazing and it can be great, but it could also be fucked up. Like, you know, let's not get it twisted. There's the ups and the downs. So, and we have to be able to hold space for everybody. And so I think it's really important, especially in this time, that we don't turn that blind eye, that we, you know that, and welcome those people. That's why it's so beautiful that you are still, you know, doing the podcast and the brick and mortar. So you're reaching people in so many different ways, which is so needed right now because a lot of people want that connection. They want that feel that they belong to a community, and that they have somewhere to go that they can talk to and learn about all these things. So thank you for opening that up.
Thank you so much. And you know, for us, my sister and I, it's really about embracing, you know, so many, and we even notice even within, you know, our own private communities where, you know, some people are like, I'm not gonna go there and I'm not gonna go there. Or those people have that color skin, or I'm not, and I'm like, that's a small business. I have a small business. I'm going to
That's
support it.
right. There's something about that community of small businesses. It's like, we know,
We know. I'm gonna go
what
get
can I
my
spend at
coffee.
your place,
This
right?
is this is sorry guys, like, do you know, like, honestly, like, so this is my community wellness activist little plug. I read today on Brooklyn Patch that in New York has lost over 100,000 small businesses.
Yeah.
So how can we support? And I know that a lot of us are struggling, right? So sometimes I have $10 in my pocket. I'll go across the street and I'll get that coffee from that mamacita
That's
because
right.
I know they're struggling. You know, I right now, me and my sister, we're not open yet, but we're getting some orders online, and we know we're gonna be okay. Hopefully, we open soon. So we got to keep that faith. But we need to support. You know,
Mhm.
eh, a lot of people don't see how hard entrepreneurs and the small business people work, and it's a multi-layered, right? It's a multi-layered experience. And then when you're in then when I feel like when you're working at it with this tier where it's energetic, where it's spiritual, where you're intuitive, that's your, I don't even have words for it because you're, it's complicated, it's more beautiful, and it's also harder, right? It's
It
also
is harder. It's a lot
harder.
harder.
Like, a lot of people are like, you're so lucky, you get to be here surrounded by crystals all day and incense, you must have like the best job in the world. I'm like,
Yes.
yes, and sometimes the hardest.
Yeah. Because you got
Sure.
to get up and you got to go there and you got to deal with it.
Cause, right, because I could have the worst morning in the world, but if I have a reading that I said yes to, I have to, I have a responsibility to clean myself up, to sage my ass up,
Mhm.
so that I could receive that person with all of their, and be able to witness them 100%,
Mhm.
right, as best as I can. And it's not like, oh, I don't feel good today, so I'm not gonna show up. You don't got that choice.
That's right.
That's
That's
true.
right.
That's true. Speaking of support, I've put in chat for our people who are logged on here the link to your website and the link to your Cafecito break
Thank
Instagram.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. I want, before we go, I want to ask you something really specific about your business. So I see on your website you've got something called botanical care packages. Can you tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that? Because there are lots of people. I realize that you're still doing, you're still in business. Your door
Yes,
may be
thank God.
closed to your building, but you're still doing business. So tell us a little bit about that. I'm so curious.
So our little care packages, there's two ways. Like, we have like a suggested, like, there's like a prosperity, like a love and protection, and they start about $25, and you get like two crystals and either a sage or a palo santo. But at the same time, like, if you're feeling like, I just want to talk to one of the sisters, or want to email, I need this stone, or I'll trust you. I'm going through this, and I'll trust whatever you can get, and this is my budget. We work with that, and it's beautiful because we get to feel you out either through words, or like, if we chat with you on the phone, and then we'll put together a little package. I mean, Heather and I went through that experience. I loved it because
We
I got
did.
to chat with her.
Right. I actually was trying to get this off my altar, but I put like a thing on top of it. But it came in this beautiful package, and it was all sweetly put together and had a little this and a little bit of that. And you could tell there was an I sent it out to three friends, and four friends. And I was like, everyone was like, oh, look, it was like little surprises, and it was just what was needed. And it was all my friends who are quarantined by themselves, so it was really, it was just perfect. It was just
You
perfect.
know, it's like, it's one of those things, like, this is one of my favorites. This is selenite, and selenite is in the salt family, and you see how it shimmers. It's like,
Mhm.
it's also nicknamed liquid light, and some people say that it's, you're holding something that exists in another dimension. And one of my favorite favorite stones that my sister and I could talk hours about is this one. It's in the salt family, so it could melt. But what do we know about salt? It purifies, right? It
It
detoxes.
also, it conducts electricity, which is what energy is.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah, and when I walk with this, I feel like I'm Shira.
Yeah. Honey, you are Shira.
Ay, Dios mío.
You are.
Ay, Dios mío. But thank you, and it's also like our show. Our nickname for Botanical is the teeny tiny shop of love because it's very tiny little crystal closet, and a lot of like the care packages little depending on what you want, right? But something small can pack a big punch of love,
Mhm.
right? And I find that the greatest gift is the intention that it is sent with, and so when people receive that. So, guys, thank you so much for inviting me to the psychic pool party. I
Oh,
really,
thank you
really
for
enjoyed
coming.
myself.
Thank you.
And may I share
Yeah.
one more thing? One more thing.
Yes, please.
I Cafecito break is in the middle of giving birth to a brand new baby, and it's
Ooh.
called Cafecito Boricua, and it's mostly Spanish, but it's a spiritual arts and entertainment channel that it's being birthed.
Fantastic.
And so yeah, so all that information is on the Instagram page. So I recommend if you guys want to check it out. I would love it.
Oh, I'm excited. That's great.
Thank you
Fantastic.
guys.
Thank
Mwah.
you.
Many
Thank you.
blessings. Have a
Mwah.
beautiful day. And to all of your audience, I hope you guys are safe and well and are strong. And if you want to learn about the Perez sisters, check out our website, botanical.com with a K.com. And you can email us if you're interested in a little care package.
Well, we'll have to have you both back at some point.
Oh,
Have
yeah,
both,
that would be awesome.
right?
Yeah,
This will be up on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. So,
Ooh,
yeah,
I can't wait.
can't wait. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you
cuties.
so much. Be well.
Love from Brooklyn. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.